I don't want to make this video. I think the only way I can make this video is just straight through. Probably gonna reveal some things about myself that have not yet been known on the internet. I would imagine this video is probably also going to trigger people in my life that I love dearly. So, yeah, that's where we're starting. We're not gonna edit this video. It's just gonna be me running straight through things. Why am I making this? So a couple of days ago, I noticed that my calves have been really tight, and my wife reflected to me that I've been bouncing my legs more, right? So if I'm like sitting down and my toes are bouncing my legs, and she just asked if I was okay. And I gotta be honest, with everything going on in the political space right now, it has a tendency to make me feel a little off kilter. Um, but the crazy thing is I slept just fine last night. And the night before that, and I consider that a privilege. I know that sleep doesn't come easily to many people, and I know that for many people, part of the queer community, part of the certain sectors that are being challenged, that their human rights are being questioned, I know that this can be a challenging time for many people, and a lot of my friends aren't sleeping. So I think we need to talk about it, right? If someone having a conversation a few thousand miles away is triggering you, or someone saying something and that being clipped out of context and fed into your news media or into your social media or into your little personal device is causing an issue, you might be swinging above your weight, right? So I kind of want to start from the big picture of what's going on, right? And understanding in a big blanket statement here, my intention here is not to trigger anyone. My intention is to provide new resources, ways of thinking, ways of being, so that we can reclaim control over our reality and our nervous system and really feel like we can do things to make our world the way we want it to be, right? There's no worse feeling than being or feeling disempowered, like that you can't do a damn thing. And yet, that is the narrative that so many people are subscribing to right now, feeling like it's hopeless, feeling like it's just too big or too much. And yet, still, like being part of that drip philosophy, like the little notes coming into your system every single day, the clips, everything. It's mind-boggling what we're putting ourselves through, just from a neurological perspective, right? Just even from just like a nervous system perspective, what we are susceptible to. Promised I wouldn't edit this, so here we go. So from the big scale, right? And this is after a lot of research, a lot of conversations with experts, but please do your own research, right? Don't just take me saying research as like I've done many peer-reviewed studies. I haven't done any studies, right? I don't have any credentials to be talking about this. This is just something that's really resonated with me and that's helped a lot of my clients. So from a big picture perspective, many of the issues we have today are because of deeply held cultural norms, which have evolved into societal values and structures, which then get reinforced by beliefs, by patterns, and by behaviors, right? So at the end of the day, the only reason you have to listen to someone who says they're president is because we have created a governmental structure as a part of our societal structure that has a hierarchical system where one person is in charge and there's a certain purview. We give them a job description, an area of expertise, if you will. And we say, all right, if you are in this position, this is what you have control over. This is what you can do, right? And we design governments as systems to sustain society so that we all can feel like we can live in an area in a state of relative safety, right? It's meant to be a governing body which allows people to have their voice heard as to what is right or what is just or what feels like a way that everyone can win, right? So if you don't like the system, you're probably already in the wrong society, right? So maybe look into other systems. If you do not like a democratic republic, if you do not like capitalism, right? If you do not like these systems and you live in the States, you may want to look into other systems of government, other socioeconomic systems, and just see if any of them fit you a little bit better, okay? So bring it down from the systems of government and the systems of capitalism, right? We have capitalism, there's socialism, there's fascism, there's many different isms, right? But understanding the fundamentals of how that work, which I'm not an expert on, so I'm not going to go in and explain it. The idea is that everything is driven in our society today based on the value of exchange, right? So if you think that money is something that you need to take from another person or money is something you can have, I don't think you have a great understanding of the system that we currently exist in, the capitalist system, nor the governmental system, right? If somebody says something on TV, unless their role in government is defined as such that they are allowed to make those changes, they are just saying something on TV, right? So imagine for a moment, if you will, that you are in the top position of power, that you are head of the executive branch, and you decide that you want everyone to behave in a certain way, right? You have to take into account the beliefs, the systems, and the patterns that currently exist, and then you actually have to create a new narrative, right? Because if you say, I'd like everyone to behave this way, but you don't have any way of facilitating that, of enforcing that, or most importantly, of just like guiding people through it, right? Then nothing will change, right? You will just be a voice among the din of voices. You'll be another little soundbite, right? So if you want your soundbite to stand out, what do you need? You need awareness. You probably need entertainment. So you're going to say it in a way that gets people looking at you like, why are you different than the other guy? You're going to attack certain systems or position yourself against certain systems that are currently widely talked about or spoken about, right? You want an emotional response because people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel. And if you really want to start a revolution, you really want to change the tide of society, you need to be speaking from a pretty inflammatory state of being, right? Because nothing gets people fired up like something that they disagree with or something that they feel threatens their way of being or something that challenges them in a way that they're not comfortable with, right? So the more inflammatory, the more noteworthy that you can thing that you can say, the bigger impact you can have. And if you want to have a big impact, these things need to be top of mind for you. So the reality is the people that are winning at governing today, the people that have the most influence are the people who get listened to the most. So it doesn't necessarily if you listen and agree or you listen and disagree. If you are listening, you are participating in the narrative that is being spread. And the narrative that needs to be spread to the central point, to the people that are influential around the central point, to all of the downstream people that will take action based on the central point, and all the way out to the surrounding areas that also have their own sovereignty, all the different states that then need to also enforce things. We all have to be on the same narrative. So if there's any ambiguity about it, like this is or this isn't happening, it causes a lot of widespread panic, right? And panic's not good for economies. So economies really love certainty, right? They really love when everything is going to be happening this way or everything is going to be happening this way. That is where we create the stability, right? So if you understand the way that all these systems coexist, right? You want a narrative, you want it to be very emotionally driven, and you want it to be consistent, right? You want to be saying the same thing over and over again. And if by any chance you have an agenda that you do not want widely known, the best thing you can do is just like, if you take a child to the doctor and they need to get a shot, then you sit there and you're just like, no, look over here, look over here, look over here, whoo, right? Catch their attention, right? At the end of the day, we like to think of ourselves as these very evolved, highly conscious beings, but a lot of us is just stumbling through the day. We're just trying to look at the thing that interests most. And then we neglect the responsibility of regulating our own nervous system, of taking ownership over our own exchange with the world, over understanding the system that we are in charge of governing, i.e. our body, right, our mind, and we outsource that to things that make us feel good. So between our lack of regulation over our we'll call it dopamine ingestion, right? Anything that is playing with the brain chemicals, whether that's the serotonin, the dopamine, not even knowing a lot of times what your antidepressants do as far as being an SSRI inhibitor, our lack of ownership over our own physical bodies, not taking them and giving them the exercise or stretching them the way they need, or even knowing how many different muscles you have and how to access those and how to nurture that, our lack of responsibility over the food that we eat, right? Understanding where did this food come from? What is the energy that this food brings in my body? How does my body react, right? My body might like this kind of food and your body might not like this kind of food. But instead we just say, oh, well, it's popular on Instagram, so I'm sure it's good for me, right? Oh, it's got 5 stars on Google, I'm sure it's good for me, right? And all of this noise is happening out here. And the reality is, if you are in that position of power, you have to have a tremendous level of insight and knowledge into how these greater systems work, right? Which probably means that you've not only been studying them your whole life, I would bet you that you come from a lineage of people that have studied the systems of governing and power and influence, right? Understanding that the way that we influence each other has changed drastically in the last few years. It used to be, whoever had the most stable plan. Then it became whoever had the most exciting plan. And now it's kind of become whoever has the most like TikTok-worthy plan, right? So the way that society is influenced is still open for debate and is still evolving. And to know how that works and then have a microphone big enough to be able to reach the world and to reach it effectively and motivate change, this is not your first rodeo, right? And that's fine. Everybody's at different levels. It's not better, it's not worse. It's just understanding where you're at, right? So think of this like, doing a wrestling match or having a boxing match. A lot of these more intense physical sports have weight categories, right? And you have to understand and not be punching above your weight, right? Understand your opponent, understand the size differentials, understand how to use different weights. That doesn't mean that a scrawny guy can't fight a big guy, right? But it does mean that you need to be aware of what it takes in order to fight someone twice your size. And for most people, and in most instances, it's a really good idea to stick to your weight class, right? A lot of things happen when we step outside of the realm of knowledge that we have access to. Now, you can grow your level of knowledge, you can get better at it, but you're not there yet. So when you open up your phone and you engage in a discussion on a topic that you have no idea what's happening, what the original poster intended, what the context was of that post, what was the situation that was being addressed in those comments, we're just out of our league, right? Big entire companies are in charge of the marketing message for the different political campaigns and the different political parties, right? Huge companies paid millions and millions, probably billions of dollars. I don't know. I haven't looked up the statistic. Okay. So if they're paid all of this to control the narrative and then we get in and we start tip-tapping on our phone, right? We're literally punching above our weight class. So how do you sleep at night, right? How do you get back to a state where you can open your phone, hear a conversation, see someone on the TV, see crazy things being passed as far as legislation, see heinous, how do we settle this in our own mind, in our own body, right? Now, what I'm not saying is do nothing, okay? And this needs to be really fucking clear, because doing nothing is definitely fertile ground for evil and for darkness to grow, right? We need the light. But what I'm also not saying is go comment on every single social media post, go participate in every rally, right? These are big things that we need to understand how we want to play. And ultimately we need to come back to what is my role in this world? What ultimately is it my job to provide? When I'm working with people, one of the biggest lessons I had to learn was that context is everything. So some days you might be able to hear what's going on with a fellow person and be able to meet them there and be able to serve them there, and that could be beautiful. Other days you might not have the capacity to do that, right? That's why I think long-term contracts in any kind of a situation are kind of fraught with issues and challenges, because a lot of times we don't know what's going to unfold in the future. So be these marriage contracts, employment contracts, even the contract you have with the bank on a 30-year mortgage, right? Long-term contracts in today's day and age are a little intense, especially when you're making a contract with somebody at a very different weight class than you. So when you make a contract or an agreement with someone who's at a completely different level than you, be very careful. Be very careful. You might get your ass kicked. So what do we do, right? Taking personal responsibility, I think, has to be the first step. And in order to do that, you want to understand the context of your life. So what comes into your life and what goes out? Beginning simply going back to the systems of exchange, what comes in and what goes out, right? So if you think about it, in the morning, sunlight comes in and then energy begins to awaken, your cortisol levels rise, and then you go into the day, right? Then you have the energy to output everything into your muscles, to mobilize your body, to sit up, right? And then you put water into the kettle and you boil it, and out comes boiling water. And from the boiling water, you make yourself tea or coffee, right? Understand all of these things are systems. And energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be moved. So everything in your system costs something. And this is super critical, right? Everything in your system costs something. Most people are wildly unaware of the fact that it costs something, and they're also not fully taking ownership of what they're gaining, right? So let's go to the microsystem, right? Let's call it TikTok or Instagram or whatever you happen to be browsing, right? What does it give you, right? It might give you a dopamine hit. It might give you a little bit of entertainment. Really what it does is it alleviates the imbalance for you that's in your system. So unless you go on with a purpose of, I need to find this recipe, I need to understand this concept, I need to check in on this metric, right? Unless you're going on there with a purpose, you're going on there probably to avoid something that's out of balance in your life, right? So the response is, it's kind of like an Advil for your nervous system, right? If you take an Advil and you have a headache, most of the time it doesn't actually fix the problem of the headache. It can postpone some of the symptoms, so hopefully you have enough time to hydrate yourself or address whatever the original cause of the headache was. But for many people, they'll just pop an aspirin and then pop an aspirin the next day. My grandmother used to pop Excedrin like they were going out of style, right? And never stop to say, I wonder why I have a migraine, right? I wonder what inner conflict is really going on here. Just being pop them, right? And not her fault. Probably what she was taught, right? There was probably not a place safe enough for her to figure out where that conflict was, right? But I wouldn't say that that's an excuse any longer, right? We are becoming more and more aware. We have more and more access to the ability to make the kind of money you need, to have access to the kind of support you need to have, and to be able to make the impact you're meant to make, right? A lot of things that used to be limited by geographic location are no longer limited, right? You can live pretty much anywhere. A lot of things that used to be limited by access to information, like before people could read, is no longer an issue. And then we had information, but it was all tucked away in books, in specific libraries, and now we have the internet, right? All of the barriers to you being able to have the exact life you want is pretty much gone. So why aren't we doing it? Because we aren't taking it in small enough steps. So back to TikTok. TikTok being an aspirin for your headache, right? An aspirin for the nervous system dysregulation. You take it, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel better. I feel smarter, right? I just watched someone quote me my horoscope, or I just watched someone tell me that I'm doing a good job, and suddenly I feel fantastic, right? I looked at a little quote, and it was great, and now I'm feeling top 10, right? Well, what have we done? What did we give it, right? So you gave probably your time, which is everyone's biggest, most limited resource, but more importantly, you gave it your awareness, okay? And what you put awareness on grows. So whatever awareness you put on gets bigger. Anyone who's ever accidentally clicked on an ad on one of their feeds knows this, right? You put your click, your awareness into it, and entirely, all of a sudden the world's like, you want to know everything about this app? We can tell you everything about this app. I'm going to just show you all the different features in ads for the next 20 days. Because the world that has something to sell you is very, very desperate for your awareness, right? So if I'm on the other side of this, if I need you to be aware of me, right? Let's say that I have a goods or a services that I want to offer you. I need you to be aware. And so in order for you to pay attention to me, what's the first thing I'm going to do? Give you something. What's the most common thing people need right now? Just to freaking smile, just to be entertained, right? Just to be a little bit distracted from everything else going on. So everyone's trading on this, right? Remember when Super Bowl commercials used to be a big deal and they were all hysterical and they were all amazing? They've gotten a little bit worse over time, in my opinion, but I don't even watch the Super Bowl anymore, so I don't really know. But I remember when it was a thing, right? Everyone would sit down and watch all the Super Bowl commercials because it brought us such joy, right? What happened to good old fashioned like friend hangouts? I read something in the study of the Blue Zones, which if you aren't familiar with, they studied the cultures around the world that have the highest age per capita, right? So the average age of when people die is the absolute highest. And they actually studied their diet more than anything. But one of the factors that they found when they were studying the diets of the most long-lasting civilizations around the world, present day, right? This isn't something from like years and years ago, but present day, the people that live the longest, one of the factors they couldn't quite put their finger on, they said it was cultures where at many times during the day, they stopped and they connected with another human. And most often it had something to do with like being made fun of, right? I heard like, just don't take yourself so goddamn seriously all the time, right? So if we're not taking ourselves so seriously, how do we keep showing up for ourselves with all of the sincerity required and yet still maintain an element of this is okay. This is a game, right? Life happens and then it stops happening. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? You can't take it with you when you go. Money is monopoly money. How do we just bring it back down and play a little bit, right? So in the effort of playing, I'm going to stretch a couple of concepts, right? One of them being I identify as a trans man. And this is not something I share all the time publicly, right? And I was able to show up for a trans brother of mine yesterday and was really able to encourage him on his journey. I also celebrated Easter yesterday. Also celebrated 420 yesterday. Also celebrated relationships with people that voted for the person in office who currently doesn't want me to be a thing, right? I'm all over the place, right? Like my entire life has just been a mismatch of 100 different things, and I'm okay with it, right? I like to play. I like to try things I haven't tried before. I like to experience things I haven't experienced before, because at the end of the day, it's about me regulating my system, about showing up as the person I want to be, need to be, desire to be, so that I can continue to find out who that is and then do the most good in the world by positioning myself with the most fidelity and openness to be able to do that. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just showing up. If somebody needs to be loved, I hope that I get the chance to love them, right? If somebody needs to be led, I hope that I get the chance to lead them. If somebody wants to try their hand at leadership, I hope I get the chance to follow them, right? Because at the end of the day, all I can be responsible for are the people in my space. So I live in a space where I have the opportunity to love people. I live like downtown. I live around many different people, many different ethnicities, age ranges, socioeconomic statuses, like all the different things. I mix and match every day. And so many people that I'm around are always striving for the next best thing. How do I get to the next mastermind? How do I get to the room where these people are? How do I get here? How do I coach with this person? How do I experience this? How do I get front row seats at the next Taylor Swift Eras tour? How do I go to the Super Bowl? What? Where are you going? Where are you going? And what are you running from? At the end of the day, all you've got is yourself. And if you can't become your own best friend, and you can't resource what you need from the life that's directly around you, this is going to get real hectic real fast, because everyone else has an agenda, right? And they're not evil for having an agenda, and this isn't the agenda. This is not one of those scare videos, right? They're doing something, and they have the power to do that. They have the microphone to do that. They have the access to do that. They have the job title to do that. They have the right to have that agenda. And if you're going to have power, please, for the love of God, use it for something. And if you don't have that power, don't play that game. Go back to what you do have access to. Start where you're at. What money do you have in your bank account? What are you going to invest it to bring you? I don't care if you have $5 in your bank account. Every single dollar you spend is an investment. If you invest it in a coffee, you are going to reap the benefits of the caffeine or the euphoria or the treating yourself emotion that comes with that, whatever it is, right? If you're going to use it to pay your rent, you are investing in the home that you are living in the space that you are dwelling in, right? If you invest it in a book, you are investing it in knowledge, right? Every single dollar you spend is an investment. What are you investing in, right? Every single breath you take, you are one step closer to death. What are you taking the breath for? Are you taking the breath so that you don't die, or are you taking the breath so that you can live? Do breath work, journaling, right? Every single emotion you experience, everyone who isn't on this earth anymore would probably give a whole lot to experience that again. Every single emotion you experience has information for you, about you. It has nothing to do with anybody out there. It has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with how you're able to show up in the world. So every emotion is a gift. When's the last time you wrote them down, thanked those emotions, said, wow, grief, I haven't seen you in a while. Oof, despair, you're heavy. Welcome back, friend. What if we interacted with our emotions as treasured friends? What if we took every single dollar that came into our system and we invested it back into everything that brought us what we wanted? What if we quit focusing on everything we couldn't change and we simply focused on the next breath? What if we started to appreciate every relationship a little bit more? And they don't all need to stay. Don't get my idea here that this is like a blank check of just like be happy where you're at and never grow. No, not that at all, right? But if you don't stop punching above your weight class from a nervous system perspective, you won't ever be able to grow because you'll be in complete fight or flight, and that'll kind of be the end of it. That's all I came to say today. Really just wanted to share a little bit of what's going on in my world. Remind us all to kind of come back down. Come back to where you can control. Control your breath. Control your body. Take care with what you put into your body. Show up with gratitude. Pursue whatever interests you. Continue to defend your ability to love the world. But don't just love the whole world, and don't try to love every politician, but love yourself. If you loved yourself half as much as your best friend or your parent loved you, what would you do today? If you were completely responsible for taking care of yourself in a truly loving way and showing you that you loved you, what would you do? Those decisions that you've been putting off, waiting to make, thinking maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll stay in this job another 5 years, maybe I'll quit tomorrow, whatever decision you've been waiting on, what says I love you the most to you? What decision says you're safe? I believe in you. We can do this. Show up for yourself. And if you need to, get rid of social media. There's nothing that needs to be seen on the internet. You don't need to watch another one of my videos. For all I care, this can be our final goodbye. But I just really want you to know that you are enough for you. You can just love you, and that can be enough.